everybody. Speedy here, Banu Studio Inc. I'd like to continue the series Tales from the Drafting Table. We are on episode 23. Um, we're on the subject, the third part of the subject, Aristotle and Plato, my tribute to them doing the drafting and prepping for Pitt. And kind of going to be changing formats again a little bit. And I may be doing a change of schedule again. I just kind of feel like 2 days a week is probably even still too much. And I could probably just film all week and compile a little bit more and get a little deeper into the storytelling and shorten the number of parts to it so it's not broken down over such a long period of time. So I'm going to go ahead and start that with this particular episode and kind of changing the format up. And I may be dropping the outro. I'm going to go ahead and keep the outro in this one, but for episode 24, I think it will probably be dropped. But you can still look forward to episode 24 coming out on Tuesday. And we will look at what I'm doing after that as far as schedule. I'll post some schedule updates on YouTube and on my Discord channel and on Facebook. But anyway, let's get to this subject. It's a pretty cool subject. And yeah, hindsight, a very touchy subject. It's hard not to delve into what these men mean and what they represent. But I do what I can. So I tell some stories and I also tell some bullshit, talk some shit. It's hard to not to. They're that important to Western civilization and Western society. But anyway, let's get to it, shall we? Okay, so continuing on with Plato. Like I said, my reference material is from Head On and not Profile and not very good reference material. So I, in the last episode, did a sketch of him as the reference material that I had. And in this part, I'm working on Profile, and you'll notice I'm pointing him in the right direction, so the decision has been made. He's definitely a right-brained individual. I believe he was definitely a right-brained individual. I mean, he was mythic, intuitive, and visionary, which tend to be right-brained people's wheelhouse, if you will. And when I chose this subject, I chose it because of love, for one, and because of visual inspiration that was in my head, because I spent a lot of time studying both of them, all of them, really. But I didn't really think about it at the time in terms of delivering the subject on Tales from the Drafting Table, how, well, technically dangerous this subject matter actually is. And this is an area where opinion needs to stay quiet, and it's really hard to do because of how I opened it about talking about how important they are to Western civilization, that they're the patrones, the pillars of our civilization, of the West in itself, our pathos, our thinking, our thoughts. But it's a dangerous subject in the sense that if I were to speak freely my mind as to why they inspire me, I would naturally get into places like, okay, if you don't know who Socrates is, if you don't know who Plato is, and if you don't know who Aristotle is, you should stop voting right now if you live in the West. Just stop voting. Do the entire rest of the West a favor and don't vote until you understand these men. But most especially Socrates. It could be argued, and I stand in that position, that Western civilization began to decline when we executed Socrates, and that Plato and Aristotle and everybody that followed after were endeavoring to bring back the dead, if you will. But you can also see it from a creative point of view. Technically, the minute you're born, you're dying. And so entropy started with Socrates for the West, or is that we proved how base and animalistic we still were. And these great thinkers were trying to turn us into something more enlightened. They were trying to tame the beast. That's really what philosophy is actually doing, is trying to tame the animal in humans. so that we can have a better future and have a better world. Um, but as anybody knows, living in the modern era, they're trying, but it's not succeeded. I mean, heck, the United States itself was quote unquote founded on the Enlightenment movement, and that light bulb went out pretty much before the founding fathers even passed away. So, I mean, it's a benevolent cause, it's a noble cause. It's not particularly achievable. And it all comes down to patience and being less anima. But, like I said, it's probably better that I stick to storytelling about Plato himself and avoid the more, what would you say, taboo subjects that you just can't talk about, because most that are in the anima energy, they are animals. So they will attack when they hear things they don't like to hear, like being told not to vote if you don't know the story of Socrates. It's true. You shouldn't vote if you don't know what happened to Socrates. For everybody who's picking sides in politics, they shouldn't vote either because they definitely do not understand the story of what happened to Socrates, But let's just get into stories instead and educate about him for those that are unaware but willing to learn. He was a pretty cool dude. And imagine this, I mean, he was almost a politician. Plato was almost a politician. He almost went into politics. I mean, he was from a very old, entrenched Athenian aristocratic family, and the definition of that in that time period is radically different than the way we understand it now. It's more like maybe you could say a founding family of Athens, one of many. Um, and so naturally, because of his birthright, if you will, and his status, his family status, he was naturally positioned to become a politician, may even been expected to become one. But after what happened with Socrates, kind of ruined politics for him. So he was supposed to be a statesman. And I think that in his mind, he was being a statesman, i.e., that he understood that. And I think it comes out in all of his work. He tried to create a philosopher king. He wrote about the philosopher king because he was in a way being a statesman. And I think that that's really what our founding fathers meant, that when a person retired from their profession, their vocation, they should turn their attention to becoming a statesman. I think what they meant was everybody should, when they retire, become Plato. It didn't happen. Uh, Socrates is a perfect example of why it didn't happen. And you should go on your own and independently learn what actually happened to him. And I mean independently. Don't take some lecture on it. Don't take somebody else's interpretation. You've got the ability to read and discern. You should read for yourself what actually happened to Socrates. Then you'll understand why none of the politicians are your friends. None of them should be trusted. You shouldn't really technically support any of them. You should only support ideas. And if you listen closely, they're all essentially just saying what they think you want to hear. Very Machiavellian. But we're too anima to understand that Machiavelli was an opportunity for us to learn how the powers that be really think about us and not use it against each other, but understand that the politicians and our leaders and so forth are scumbags. Anybody who wants power is a scumbag, technically. By nature, they want to dominate over others. They want to decide for others instead of illuminate and improve humanity and improve the situation for their fellow humans. They want to dictate to you what that is instead of let you decide it for yourself. So no leader is technically for freedom, no matter how much they say they are. It's just words. See, like I said, he's a very dangerous subject, isn't he? I mean, Aristotle and Plato, but it's a very dangerous subject. Let me just get into stories about him instead, But yeah, after he watched what happened to Socrates and this whole basically labeled corrupting the youth, it wasn't he was corrupting the youth. The corruption he was doing to the youth was making them aware of the fact that their parents' generation failed all of Athens and refused to take accountability for it and wanted to just brush it aside. And Socrates was like, look, you got to be better than them. I'm going to teach you how to be better than them. They're unwilling to learn. They've already calcified into who they are, and they're unwilling to do the inner work and self reflection of their own shortcomings. I'm going to teach all of you how to be better than them. And so, from that point of view, the elders who ultimately executed Socrates were like, he's corrupting the youth, meaning that he's telling the youth how their parents sucked. And their parents did suck. And they had to get rid of him. They had to get rid of him. He undermined their power by empowering the youth. What a crime, huh? Now politicians use the whole empowering the youth as a tool. They use the young people as tools, like Machiavellian. They're not actually doing it like Socrates was, where he's like, make up your own mind, but here's the facts, here's the reality. Let's introduce this circular thinking style so you can learn on your own and use your own discernment to make decisions instead of following the herd. Don't be a sheep, be a human. That got him in a lot of trouble. That gets a lot of creatives in trouble. It's probably going to get me in trouble for saying the things that I've said in this video. Let it be what it is. I'm not drinking anybody's hemlock. So I'll get on to maybe some other stories. But yeah, I think that it's definitely a direct inspiration for him writing the Republic, instead of running for office. But I do believe that he was actually doing the job of a statesman, and especially a statesman from our founding fathers' perspective. He did try to create a philosopher king in real life. He didn't just write about it. He went to mentor a young tyrant named Dionysius II. Now, even the word tyrant doesn't mean the same thing now as it did then, but, I'll just leave it at that, But he thought he was going to turn this guy into a wise king, this philosopher king, this wonderful ruler, and instead, Dionysius was animal. He was animalistic, he was petty, jealous, insecure, paranoid, and absolutely not a philosopher king in the making. He wasn't the material for it. And, Plato actually ended up getting imprisoned and almost sold into slavery. And he was rescued by a friend who paid a ransom to get him out of it. You can't patch a tyrant with philosophy. You can't repair one. And there's a lesson in that for modern politics. I mean, they're already broken the minute they jump into the machine and start emulating it. They're already the enemy. To get even to a minor level of politics, you have to allow yourself to become corrupted. It's just simple. Power does corrupt absolutely. Plato is one of many who was trying to solve that problem, and it's one of those that we may not even be able to solve it. It's not unworthy, though. He's beautiful for trying. And technically, in an unusual kind of way, all truly deep and well-educated creatives are trying to do the same thing he did. The other cool thing, though, was that he founded the Academy, which was technically the first college campus. Now, the first college campus in history, Western history anyway, sounds like the coolest place on earth to me. My research about it was it wasn't just a school, it was like a cult of nerds. They trained in mathematics, they studied geometry, they debated metaphysics, practiced athletics, worshipped the muses, lived in a sacred grove, and had a sign at the entrance that said, "Let no one ignorant of geometry enter." It's like, picture this. It's a gymnasium that's a monastery that has a math club fused with it. That's to me, that sounds like paradise. That sounds like paradise. I would love a place like that. Of course, I'm a female, and I'm not going to sit here and play this whole gender battle of the sexes thing and say, well, because I'm a female, I wouldn't have been allowed in. Technically speaking, no, I wouldn't have been, unless, this is important because we have creatures like Vespasia and Sappho, and so it wasn't impossible for a woman to enter a man's space in the ancient world, as a lot of people that are engaged in the battle of sexes would have you believe. It wasn't that black and white. I'll put it to you this way. Number one, if I had a high level of understanding of geometry and sacred geometry, which I just so happen to because I'm an artist and I'm trained in it. Number two, if I could have held up physically, and that's the part I think I would have failed on. I'm a petite Asiatic style build, so I really wouldn't have been able to physically compete with men. And that's not about equality or anything else. That's just a literal biological fact. So I think I would have failed on the athletic side. I don't think I would have been able to out wrestle anybody unless I slapped them in the face with my tit and distracted them or something, which would have caused its own problem. It would have been a bad choice. Um, but, you know, technically, if I could have made it through all of their criteria, meaning been an exceptional wrestler, because that's really what Plato was really into wrestling. If I'd been an exceptional wrestler and been able to defeat enough of them in wrestling, but also demonstrate a high level of understanding of metaphysics, which I do have, and a high level of understanding of geometry, which I do have, they may have actually let me in just because I would have been an anomaly, and they were forever curious. There would have been a portion of them would have been like, absolutely not, no females, but there would have been a portion of them going, no, we've got to collect this one and study it. How did this happen? It would have been like a potential. So I won't say that absolutely no way, no shape or form could I have made it in. If I was built differently, physically, I might have. I really might have. There weren't any women who were in a position to do so or had interest. Now, this idea that women didn't have power in that era is wrong. That's a wrong take by feminists. It's wrong. Technically, any human that was exceptional and had mastery over something that was vital or beautiful or important had power automatically because of their capabilities and because of having a mastery of something others did not have a mastery of. Sappho is a perfect example. She started her own finishing school for girls. She literally was quoted by leaders going, I want to learn to play the lyre like her and then die, because what else is there to accomplish in life but to be that good at something? So she was exceptional, and she was an exceptional poet. So, I mean, she was literate. I think something that gets overlooked about the archaic period and the classical period is that, especially in Athens, aristocratic young men were seeking women who were educated because they actually believed strong willed, strong minded, well educated women would make them better wives because it would make them better men. So they actually did believe in a certain level of intellectual advancement for their women. Now they still expected them to cook, clean, and keep the hearth, but they actually expected to be able to have conversations with them about sophisticated subjects and to be able to discuss the nature of the polis and things like that. They wanted women who wouldn't bore them. They wanted women who would help make them stronger, make them better. So women weren't necessarily excluded from education. A lot of it had to do with your class. A lot of it really did. So many people were born slaves or at the lowest caste where they were never going to have an opportunity to get educated. But like foundational families, most definitely, like noble families, absolutely educated their daughters because they wanted them to be the best option available. They wanted to give them all the tools available to be a good wife, to be a good partner. So from that point of view, it wouldn't have been impossible. It's just that no woman even attempted it. Probably wasn't interested. May not have gotten education in geometry, but later you find Vespasia, who is technically the founder of modern astronomy. She definitely understood geometry, so it definitely clearly changed, especially under Alexander the Great and during the time when Aristotle was a lead philosopher, a lead thinker. Um, but yeah, there was a lot of really funny things about him, like he wrote dialogues because he hated giving lectures. So he'd rather do things in a conversational way. And I think a lot of that had to do with his time spent with Socrates, but he also had other things like, a lot of atheists are like, I'm Neoplatonist and I'm all about the practical. Hold on a minute. Plato wasn't an atheist. Not at all. He believed in reincarnation, and he believed that souls chose their next life. Very Gnostic. I think actually, if you look close, you can find a lot of Gnosticism in what Plato believed, what he was into. I think he's the one that created the myth of air. Plato describes the afterlife like a cosmic DMV, that's the best way to put it. Souls lined up, they chose their next life, they picked from templates like tyrant, athlete, philosopher, animal, king, beggar, and then they got dropped back into the world. For me personally, I can see why he would have believed in reincarnation. It makes an awful lot more sense than crowding up heaven and having to make new souls every time. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Where is all that material coming from? Makes a lot more sense to recycle souls and give them many opportunities to come back and learn and grow and live different lives to become fully well-rounded, something like that. I mean, it's just more logical. I'm not going to sit here and say I believe in that kind of thing. I don't really do belief. I do gnosis. There's some things you can know, and there's some things you just really can't know. You can only know on the surface level, and that's knowledge. The difference between gnosis and knowledge, not the same thing. But he really did believe the universe was built on built by a cosmic craftsman, if you will. And when you look at the Freemason symbol with the G, the grand architect, and all that, they're just carrying on what he believed. They really are. A lot of the secret societies like that really are just Platonists. They're just in the school of Plato and agree with what he said about things like spiritual nature of humans and the soul and the afterlife and all that. They believe it. And because of the mainstream religions, they have to keep their belief in his cosmological view and his view of things to themselves. And they have to hide it under all this symbolism and all these layers. Perfectly natural when you think about it. But yeah, Plato actually does discuss the demiurge, which is clearly a Gnostic subject. He was a Gnostic. It's not popular to say, it doesn't get said out loud, but he definitely was a Gnostic. And that's interesting. That's very, very interesting. And you should go do your own research on what Gnosticism is. And again, as I said, I don't do belief, I do gnosis. And I'm alive, and I have experienced, death and coming back from it. What I saw hasn't convinced me of anything, but I did experience something. But I think it's kind of like an engine tuning down. It's going to transmit and throw its last visions, its last things out in a kind of panic. So I can't say that there is anything. But I think there's value in the study and the philosophy of it because it does kind of give a moral code. I mean, if you take the fully atheistic path, then there's nothing to live for. There's also nothing to give you a reason to be a decent human being, and that's kind of an awful thing. I prefer philosophy to religion, honestly, and Gnosticism seems like a nerd's religion. So I don't dislike it. I enjoy studying it a lot, and as an artist, it's kind of essential. Yeah, I didn't want to rant and go into it too long. I still kind of end up talking about things, that I controversial things like saying if you don't know who Socrates is, you should just stop voting right now. Well, I may get in trouble for it, but I absolutely still believe that. If you don't know his story and what happened to him, you need to stop participating in politics and go get a baseline education on what politics actually is and quit dividing people and quit joining in the division. It should literally be us against all politicians, against all of them. It should be all of us united against all of them. That's really the way it's supposed to be. That's proper checks and balances. Choosing sides makes you weak, makes you wrong, technically. There is no right side on that. The politicians are 99% of the time wrong. They're playing a game. Don't join on their side. Stay on the side of the people. Stay free. Keep your mind open. But yeah, like I said, didn't think in hindsight about how dangerous a subject it is doing a series about Plato and Aristotle, but the artwork must be done. I must get it out of my head. They are that beautiful. And so I'll continue the series and I'll get closer to it. The next one, I'm going to obviously begin on Aristotle. And I have better reference material for him. All right, I think we've said enough. Believe me, I've said a lot of things I shouldn't have. But, well, I'm authentic. I'm just going to say what's in my head. All right, y'all. That's the conclusion of episode 23. We've gotten his face done in profile now, which is very challenging considering what my reference material is not that great. So I'm having to infer a lot and use my education a lot, my artistic education a lot to accomplish it. And but next we'll move on to Aristotle, and we'll get into refining them a little bit and adding the other elements after that. All right, I hope everybody has a wonderful day and manifest all the wonderful things you want for yourself and your life. Okay, Speedy out. Bye, guys. See you in the next episode.